Hey guys, it's Daniel, licensed therapist. Whilst perusing YouTube, I came across the Whatever podcast. It's a podcast where they talk about love and relationships and sex and the difference between men and women. And it's basically this guy, Brian, and he gets guests on there. And a lot of times it's just men versus women. So he gets his guests, which are the guys, and he gets girls who are usually younger girls, and they debate each other on these topics. It's really fascinating. But typically, like I said, it's girls versus guys. And typically, it's the guys just dunking on these girls. And it's very fascinating to watch. I love it. But to me, it's a little like the blind leading the blind. There's a lot of people talking about stuff, and I feel like they really don't know what they're talking about. But they brought on a psychologist, and I was like, all right, a professional to tell these people what's up. But to my chagrin, this psychologist is against marriages, which to me is crazy. How are you against one of the best things ever? As someone who works with marriages and someone who is married and someone who sees marriages as one of the best things ever, I felt like I had to respond to this. So let's go to battle with this guy and see what he says and see if he has any good points. Let's get into it.
When it comes to marriage, it's like, yeah, I've seen up close. My parents' divorce took 3 years. It was really tough. And I work with guys all the time who are going through divorces, and absolutely the liabilities of divorce disproportionately affect men, like without a doubt. But that's kind of the general argument that I hear from guys against marriage. It's just like it's so risky. But I'm going to give another potential argument, which is, well, what do you get as a man from marriage that you can't get without getting married? Like just a few moments ago, you said you wouldn't risk it for the love of your life. And my rebuttal is, why can't you just love each other without getting married? What does love have to do with marriage?
What are you considering marriage? Paperwork? Like, what do you count as marriage? Because I didn't count my wedding dress or the wedding rings or the ceremony or the government paperwork as marriage.
Well, that's a wedding, yeah. So to me, a marriage is a civil commitment.
So right off the bat, it's pretty evident that this guy is very, very biased. And he's biased for a good reason. He talks about very openly and I would say bravely his experiences in his parents' divorce. But it's disappointing to me because he's there as the professional, as the authority, and he's leveraging his degree and his position as a psychologist to speak out against something that I think, like I said before, is very, very good. And he asked the question, is there any benefit to marriage?
Why is that?
Gee, I don't know. How about a lifelong basic need for commitment and partnership that is programmed into us as human beings that will offer us fulfilling lives and also create an environment to successfully raise children? I don't know. Am I crazy? Is that a benefit to marriage? And if you think you can have that by just being in a relationship, just having a girlfriend or a boyfriend, or just having a partner, then you are neglecting or you didn't get to relationship 101, which is commitment is an integral part of relationships. If you don't have commitment, you don't have a good relationship. And a marriage solidifies that. And I feel like this guy is totally missing that part. He is totally missing the commitment that marriage is. And as a psychologist, I'm scratching my head on why he doesn't see that. But let's continue and see what we can't find.
I remember when my grandmother divorced my grandfather in her 60s, she said that's when her life began. Like, I understand that the divorce rate is very, very high. Like, I don't say, looking at a 55% divorce rate, there's absolutely no way that I would put my head in that noose. But divorce is also, it's good that it exists because it gives people an out of really difficult situations. Now, there's got to be some space in the middle between like implementing divorce only under these really extreme fringe cases and 55% of the time. There is a great deal of space between those two places.
All right, so this guy, and I commend him for this, shares more about his personal experiences. And these personal experiences are anecdotal evidence. It isn't necessary, solid, concrete evidence, but it is important, and I feel like it does help tell his story of why he came to his conclusions. And now what he does, he points out divorce as something as good. And he also points out marriage, and he implies that it's something that's bad and or painful. And when I look at this guy, do you know what I see? I see somebody that's afraid. And I believe he's afraid of three things. Number one, he's afraid of the pain that comes from a poor marriage. And I do agree with this. A poor marriage does come from a lot of pain. People come to me to try to help fix their marriage, and I understand how difficult it is to be in a marriage that isn't any good. Number two, he is afraid of the pain of divorce and what that brings. And he knows the emotional pain because he went through it with his parents and his grandparents, but also he's afraid of the financial pain of divorce, which I admit is a reality out there. And number three, he is afraid of the inability to avoid the first two, painful marriage and divorce. And it seems like he feels like he's powerless to do anything about that. He talks about the odds, like, I'm not going to put myself in those odds. Well, you know what? I disagree with that because you're not a statistic. You're a person that represents choices. And in fact, I would argue that you are a person that knows and understands emotions and relationships greater than the regular person. So you would have better odds to be in a successful relationship. But he doesn't see it like that. This is a really warped view because he only looks at the negative and he's not looking at the positive. Let's continue.
Why wouldn't she get divorced? It's like if I could work a job and if at a certain point I didn't want to work there anymore and I could take half the salary that I was making by not working, like I'm going to get more and more dissatisfied with the work that I would still have to put in at that job. It would take extremely high character and incredible integrity to put in the same amount of work and effort knowing that you could stay at home indefinitely for half the paycheck and then get another job with that time.
This is funny because he talks about divorce so flippantly, like it's no big deal, when before he's talking about divorce and how it left a mark on his life, how it was so painful to the point where he swore off marriages. And he sort of said, why not? Why not get a divorce? Well, I would say that he's a walking example of why not get a divorce. Divorce is not easy. Divorce is painful. It's painful for the husband and the wife and for the children. And it marks people. Like I said, it marked him. So why not get a divorce? There's a lot of pain involved, and it's pain that we want to avoid. And he talks about getting money as some sort of incentive for divorce. And yes, I do agree with that because he's coming from a behavior standpoint. Money is an incentive. It is a reinforcement. And if there's a reinforcement there, people are likely to do it more. But I think he's also, once again, missing the positive part of marriage. The love, the companionship, the togetherness, having children, having family. That is something that is also reinforcement. And I would say that those two things are diametrically opposed. One is pulling you toward divorce. One is pulling you toward sane. And I would say that he's somewhat out of touch with reality and with the people out there if he thinks that money is going to cause people to throw away all that good stuff. People don't exist in a vacuum, and their decision is just about money. They're weighing everything. And when we talk about divorce, it is a very, very serious thing. It's painful, like we talked about. There are financial consequences. It's expensive. There's the breaking up of families. So I don't think divorce is a good thing or should be treated so lightly like he does. Let's go on to the next clip.
That was kind of my point, is not only is it a disproportionate risk, but what's the upside?
There really isn't.
I can tell you the upside.
Legal upside.
The upside used to be she would sleep with you.
Can
But
I say
that's
the
gone.
upside? Can I say my perspective on the upside?
You mean the upside as a man?
As from marriage in general?
Well, we're talking
But-
about it from the
Jim-
man's
okay.
perspective.
Okay.
What's the
so
upside of marriage?
The upside in marriage is that what a lot of people don't understand is that men and women complement each other in the craziest way possible. Men and women have completely different brains. We're completely different creatures. But when you work together and you communicate through things, men have a fantastic perspective on certain things, and women have a fantastic perspective on things. You
Long-term
think about-
relationship.
Yes.
I agree
Don't
with
need
all
marriage.
that,
And
but
you
don't
grow
need marriage for
together
that.
more and more and more as a couple, and when
Long-term
you raise
relationship.
children, and like
Raise children in a long-term relationship.
yes.
You don't. Yeah, but you don't need. You're talking about. You can get all of the things you listed in a long-term relationship. You need not get married.
Are you talking about like marriage just without the papers? You know what I'm saying?
That's
No,
what he's
I'm.
talking
I'm
about.
just.
Yeah.
You can just be in a
Lifelong
long-term
Now, how do you establish
relationship.
it?
Okay.
Like, how
What's
does
the-
both
what-
parties know it's a long-term for life relationship?
By-
But you don't even know that if you get married. That's
Yeah.
kind of our point, because it's an at-will
point.
relationship
Good
that
But
could
I
end
know
at
that
any time.
because
If you can't see the upside of marriage and you think it's only that you get as much sex as you want, then I would say that you are pretty stunted or have a very naive or ignorant view of what relationships are. He keeps asking the question, what's the benefit? What's the benefit of relationships? And he can't see it. Obviously, we talked about his history and why he has the beliefs, but look at these girls. They can't wait. They're like, can I tell you about the benefits of relationship? And I feel like you can go out there on the street and you can say, hey, what's the benefit of relationships? And 100 different people will give you 100 different amazing things about relationships and marriage. So I think he's really out of touch. And the guys respond with, hey, long-term relationship. Just do all of this in a long-term relationship without the liability of divorce. And that goes back to commitment. And this lady at the end, I feel like raises that question really well. How do you know it's a long-term commitment? And the guys get a little dumbfounded and said, even if you get married, you don't know it's a long-term relationship. Because even if you get married, you can still break it off. You can still get separated, which is true. But it brings us full circle to what's going on inside of this psychologist's head, which is his view of marriage. It's altogether negative. I don't understand anything positive about it. And it's very skewed based on the pain that he went through. So yes, this guy's a psychologist, but he is obviously biased. And I think that raises the question, wait a second. This guy's anti-marriage and he's biased, but Daniel, you are pro-marriage. So doesn't that make you biased? To which I will say, of course not. No way can I be biased because I'm so level-headed and I see things so clearly and I am always right. I can see what he's saying. And I feel like he can't understand the positives of marriage. I can see the negatives of marriage. I can see how it can be painful. I can see how there's a possibility of difficulty in life. I can see how there's a possibility of being vulnerable financially and being vulnerable to being hurt, being cheated on, vulnerability to divorce. I understand all of that stuff, but I do feel like the positives far outweigh the negatives. And a little evidence to that is a study done by one of my favorite relationship researchers and theorists, Sue Johnson. So Sue did this interesting experiment, which I don't know if it's ethical, but what she did was she took people and she shocked them and she did brain scans on them while they're being shocked. And she said when they shocked the people, their brains would light up like a Christmas tree. And they got someone to hold their hand while being shocked. And when they did that, the brain activity lessened a little bit, but it was still very significant. And then they got their significant other, their husband or their wife, to hold their hand while they're getting shocked. And what she found was amazing. It was as if they weren't even being shocked at all. It was as if they weren't even registering any pain. And she said the conclusion of that experiment was that love makes you strong. And I am completely in agreement with that. Love, marriage, commitment, lifelong partnership is one of the most amazing things. And this psychologist is speaking out against it. So I felt like I had to react to this and speak out against what he is saying. So that's it. Very interesting stuff. Two professionals going at it. What do you guys think? If you have anything you want me to react to, just leave it in the comments down there. I thank you guys for watching. I'll see you next time.